children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God being the watchman of this nation.
Fellow Ambazonians, fellow Southern Cameroonians, my fellow countrymen, accept New Year compliments from your President, Seko Ayuk-Tabe, and his team in detention. They are sound, committed, and dedicated to our liberation struggle. Their devotion gives many the courage to keep going in moments of despair. The people of Ambazonia committed on October 1st, 2017, that freedom and independence must reign in their land. Since then, the Ambazonian nation is still enduring a genocide by the terrorist tribal colonial regime in Yaoundé. Our Homeland Security Services have determined that the war on our soil has brought untold misery, with over 40,000 killed, more than 582 of our villages and thousands of houses burned down, 1 million internally displaced in Ambazonia, and over 150,000 refugees in neighboring Nigeria, Ghana, Southern Africa, Europe, and the Mexican border. To all of you in pain and those who have lost loved ones, I come to say to you that the interim government feels your pain and that the days of your suffering and heartache will soon be over. Today, I come to talk to you about the successes and challenges we have faced since I came to office as your Vice President in May 2018, with specific emphasis on 2021 and our collective hope for 2022. In May 2018, I was called by Ambazonians and reaffirmed by the President of the interim government, Seko Ayuk-Tabe, as his Vice President, with a clear and challenging mandate to redirect and save our interim government and our revolution. The adverse impact of falsehood, manipulations, corrupt practices, mismanagement of our limited resources, and personal gains rather than putting Ambazonian first, orchestrated by those who were trusted with leadership after the abduction of our leaders in Nigeria, brought our movement in serious disrepute. This was exacerbated by brutal genocidal onslaught on our armless people and properties by Paul Biya's repugnant military junta. We took over an extremely messy institution, but I'm very thankful to genuine Ambazonians with unquenchable quests to reclaim justice and restore our total freedom, and members of our leadership team who endured and ensured we successfully stabilize and redirect the ship. Our revolution is safe and on track, and we are now earnestly cruising to Buea, though with some challenges. My dear comrades, fellow countrymen, in 2021, amongst hundreds of outrageous callous activities, the French Cameroon terrorist regime embarked on a campaign of executing unarmed civilians and toddlers. Mr. Fu Max Ndang, a physics teacher at GBHS Kumba, Mr. Jibril Ndula of Foncha Street, Bamenda, 5-year-old toddler Caroline Louise Ndiale, and 7-year-old toddler Tato Brandy were amongst hundreds of Ambazonians executed by Mr. Biya's hired assassins. These Southern Cameroonians and thousands massacred last year had long and beautiful lives ahead of them, while our thoughts and prayers remain with their friends and immediate families, we must make a collective decision to succeed in our quest for independence to honor their memories. My fellow Ambazonians, in the middle of an existential war, we are faced with self-inflicted internal tensions and obstacles to unity. But those amongst us who assume that good standards and truthfulness must bend for their immediate personal gain were proven wrong in 2021. The interim government is open to all Ambazonians with talents dedicated to contribute to our journey to freedom and independence. This is the time for all genuine Ambazonians within the interim government leadership structure, our foot soldiers, and the masses at home and in the diaspora to genuinely bond with the interim government and ensure the kind of synergy needed to facilitate our journey to Buea. We are inspired by the creation and the growth of the Bank of Ambazonia as a semi-autonomous institution that ensures effective fundraising, transparency, accountability, and responsibility in all our undertakings. The strategic innovations, support, and empowerment of refugees, IDPs, prisoners, interim government self-defense, and sister self-defense groups are some of the hallmarks of the Bank of Ambazonia. The last 12 months were positive on the diplomatic front as we made constructive strides and gains in international mainstream media. As a people, the interim government took the plight of our people to many international media outlets. The international community developed interest in our plight, and some previously hesitant nations and organizations have become partners in our liberation struggle. This success is due to the collective dedication of many comrades and the interim government of Ambazonia. Of particular note, British MPs, Mrs. Claudia Webb and Mrs. Emily Thornberry, have been outspoken in the British Parliament and press about our struggle, and I wish to extend the gratitude of the Ambazonian people to them. In 2021, your interim government launched the Big Robagon project, which enabled Ambazonians to invest in their revolution. This flagship project that was initiated to supplement the bond project has registered a measure of success as the proceeds has helped the interim government launch and support our Ambazonian Revolutionary Guard. The project is still ongoing, and I urge our people to continue to invest in the revolution through the project. Your investment in the Big Robagon project have empowered commanders to lead, organize, and coordinate their fighting units in many counties to take on the enemy robustly. We encourage our valiant liberation fighters to carry on with the good work they are doing. We are reiterating our vision in this struggle, and our vision has been to be one fighting unit, a coalition of the willing, which will make us an effective fighting force. The responsibility to protect populations from genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing, in our case, even our own excesses, has emerged as an essential global principle since the United Nations Summit in 2005. Self-defense is a right consistent with international law. We were bold and steadfast in launching the Big Robagon project in 2021. In 2022, the interim government will upgrade the ARG capacity and means to defend our territory and our people from the enemy's armed predatory violations and from its marauding rapist baby assassins. Few will have the greatness to create history by themselves, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of the Ambazonia we intend to create. Hundreds of Ambazonian Revolutionary Guards have already made a difference in the jungles of our nation, and their sacrifice will never go unnoticed. As Vice President, I've always believed that our freedom is non-negotiable. I ask for your dedication because I believe you share the hope for freedom with me. Paul Biya's brutal regime has continued to kill, extort, harass, and kidnap our people, even as refugees in Nigeria, with the complacency of some dubious and inhumane members of the Nigerian government security services. Southern Cameroonians have always considered the people of Nigeria as our brothers and sisters, and we expect the Nigerian government to uphold the moral and ethical standards required to protect, empower, and defend our highly vulnerable refugees. We will continue to remind Nigerian government and the UNHCR of their responsibility to safeguard and protect Ambazonian refugees, especially from the evil hands of the French neo-colonial monarchy of Cameroon. As a people, we Ambazonians are under French Cameroon subjugation and exploitation in every conceivable way. Freedom must be our unshakable goal. We must take the lead to free ourselves. The road ahead is dotted with many dangers, and upon us is a more significant burden of responsibility than any generation that has ever lived in our land. I note with pride your tireless sacrifices, and I pray that you continue to play your part in this journey to greatness and freedom. The international partners should demonstrate their legitimate concern for the education of our children by sponsoring in educational facilities abroad those of our children who demonstrate special attitude, and to help relocate in friendly countries contingents of our children there to continue with their education. Fellow Ambazonians, the Ambazonian Revolutionary Guards will employ strategies to defend our national interest regarding the forthcoming African Cup of Nations. We advise all Ambazonians to stay away from the games and crowded public locations. The international community must note that, as a direct consequence of the incomplete decolonization of 1961, the Southern Cameroons finds itself under colonial annexation, oppression, and a war of extermination. The humiliation and indignity are unacceptable. The United Nations and the United Kingdom must complete the decolonization of the Southern Cameroons as a matter of international law and obligation. The United Nations and the United Kingdom must play an active role in ensuring the decolonization of the Southern Cameroons from colonization, occupation, and exploitation by France and French Cameroon. Decolonization is the only alternative to colonization, and we will not stop our fight for justice, freedom, and independence. I want to put it on record that our quest for freedom and independence will continue until we succeed, no matter how long it takes. It will continue to adversely affect your families, and it will eventually collapse the evil Biya tribal regime that you failed to stand up to and to assert your rights of self-determination. Each time humans stand up for ideals or strike out against injustice, they send forth tiny ripples of hope to humanity and the world over. We urge you, people of La République du Cameroon, to stand up against the undescribable evil and darkness that has taken over your country under Mr. Paul Biya. It is up to the Yaoundé's tribal and old regime to commit to peace. We continue to assert our inalienable rights to self-determination. And in doing so, we are open to engage in negotiations to settle definitively the colonial questions we are confronted with. We are ready to negotiate, but never out of fear, and will never fear to negotiate. We completely reject any suggestions that we can possibly ever accept to be caged as slaves in French Cameroon or be connected in any form of cohabitation with that French Cameroon vassal state. We believe that French Cameroon must now accept that it has to stand and fend for itself rather than continue to depend like an invalid on the Southern Cameroons. My fellow Southern Cameroonians, fellow countrymen, we must approach our struggle with dignity and exploit not our modest diversity. We must unite by the closeness of our goals, desires, and hope for the future. Now, more than ever, it is imperative for all frontline movements in our struggle to come together as the cruelties and obstacles of the regime in Yaoundé will be ended not with outworn slogans or gimmicks on social media, and not by poorly conceived policies. Our liberation cannot be won by criminal activity, but with collaboration, honesty, integrity, monetary sacrifice, blood, and toil by all Ambazonians of goodwill. Consequently, the interim government of Ambazonia considers the arbitrary and collective imposition of so-called Amba liberation tax on our people without their consent and without any quid pro quo to be an irrational imposition on our people who are already making tremendous sacrifices in our liberation struggle. Let me use this opportunity to call on groups embarking on such a policy to cease without delay. Any funding commitments of the liberation struggle must be by all of us in the diaspora. People in the diaspora who are not themselves making financial sacrifices to our war effort have no moral authority to coerce poor and suffering people in Ground Zero to do so. Fellow Ambazonians, in 2022, your interim government will take a number of tactical strategic initiatives on Ground Zero that will change the course of our just struggle against French Cameroon depraved colonization and occupation. In 2022, the interim government intends to design and propose to the Amazonian people reorganization strategies to build from grassroots up. This information will be communicated over the coming weeks from the cabinet of the interim government. 2022 will see us launch the Rekindle Hope Outreach, our humanitarian outfit. In 2022, the interim government will launch the CR20 census project, and all Ambazonians are encouraged to register in the secure database. From now on, let us use our social media platforms to send the right message to the world that we are more united than divided. Coalition for Dialogue and its negotiations platform gives us what we need to build bridges and transmit positive messages to the international community. The Ambazonian Prisoners of Conscience Network, APOX, supported by the Global Takumban, the House of Country and Regional Representatives, the Samsoya Center for Democracy and Human Rights, the Dennis Hawley Peace Institute, and many other religious, academic, civil society, human rights, and justice organizations will be launching a massive global campaign to call for the release of all our prisoners with our president, Siseko Ayuktabe, as the face of prisoners and our revolution from the 5th of January 2022. I'm inviting all Ambazonians and solidarity partners to contribute unreservedly in making this global campaign a great success. My fellow countrymen, the regime in Yaoundé clings to the dark delusion that southern Cameroon is their private estate upon which they can enrich themselves from its abundant minerals and natural resources. It is our job, the task of this generation, to put an end to this mistaken belief. Attaining freedom is our inalienable rights before God and consistent with international law. All the display of military power from Yaoundé has not dented our spirits or reduced our collective resolve in the last 5 years. From the very onset of this war, we psychologically prepared ourselves and envisaged the ways and means for fighting indefinitely until we free our country. So, the questions every southern Cameroonian must ask are: how many men and women of ability had, since 1961, been denied the opportunity to contribute to humanity's progress because they were southern Cameroonians? How many southern Cameroonians' children have snoozed uneducated and their potential lost forever? What price will we pay for freedom? Fellow comrades, we must keep marching towards freedom and independence. The road to freedom is not easy, and high costs and danger march along us. We must remain committed, and the world needs to understand our position. There is greater hope for the future, as Ambazonians must be free. Ambazonians are prepared to sacrifice 100 times over and over to secure their freedom and their territory. Freedom has no price. Home is home. Home, sweet home. We shall continue to fight the enemy with greater determination and with all available means in our disposal until freedom is achieved. We have no shadow of doubt that freedom is in this God-ordained struggle, and it will be achieved. The lesson of history is that all colonized people and even slaves have always eventually won their freedom. We shall not be exception. We shall win, come what may. Death to the colonizers and Ambazonians, it is freedom or resistance forever. Fellow Southern Cameroonians, I thank you, God bless you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Ambazonia.
Hail this land of glory, we the Ambazonians pledge our loyalty. Praises to our Savior who granted us the freedom and led us to the heat.